Right, I think we are good to go. Good to go. Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to We'll Tell You What We're Reading from the Waltham Public Library. My name is Laura Bernheim, and I am joined, as usual, by my colleagues, Greg Carter, Liz Rior, and Louise Goldstein. We are here every month to tell you what we are reading and to share also some maybe shows and movies, as well as just to have a fun conversation for you to join in with us. Please tell us what you're reading or watching, even if you're not enjoying it. Sometimes it's more fun to hear when you're not enjoying it in our chat section. And as I mentioned, we are here every month. Our next meeting will be on June, or our next We'll Tell You What We're Reading will actually be on June 30th, right here at 2:30 p.m. is the live stream. We normally do live stream at 2:30 p.m. Today we're doing it a little bit early, but even if you're watching us at 2:30, you can always watch us on demand. If you would like to tell us what you're reading in a conversation, you can join us on Monday, June 7th at 7 p.m. Our Zoom link can be found on our website, and you can sit and talk. But this is always a great option for those of you who are a little bit, don't want to sit and talk, but just want to sit and watch some librarians discuss. Also, please go to our website to learn about all of our upcoming book club meetings. We have several coming up in the last few months. Some of our coming attractions are The Great Believers, The Poppy War, Mexican Gothic. This is all coming up over the summer. Liberty, Crying at the H Mart, The Dutch House, so many great titles. All of them can be found without a wait on Hoopla and or Overdrive or both. Most of them are, actually all of them are available as print copies throughout our network. And a lot are actually available right now. If you need help putting any of those on hold, we are always happy to help you with that. You can also just call the library and ask specifically for one of the book club facilitators. That's me or Greg or Louise or Amber, who is not on this program today, but we can also help you with those holds. And last but not least, please support our friends of the library. They are amazing. We are so lucky to have them. For those of you who enjoyed our take-home crafts from the children's room the last year, that was really thanks in part to the friends of the library. They were able to supply us with all those materials. Our Lego club is thanks to the friends of the library. And they also support a professional Zoom account, which allows us to live stream onto YouTube and makes this program possible. So please support our friends. They are the very best of friends. So without further ado, we're going to start our program, and I'm going to turn over to Louise, who is going to share her titles.
Thank you, Laura. I'm going to share my screen here. Hold on one sec. Okay, I wanted to start with the graphic novel adaptation of Octavia Butler's Kindred. This is fantastic. It is beautifully done. The authors won the Will Eisner Award in 2018 for Best Adaptation of a Book to Graphic Novel format. It's very true to the original story. It takes place in 1970s California. Dana, a writer, is married to Kevin, who is also a writer. Dana is Black, Kevin is white. They met at a sort of a crummy job that they worked in, kind of a dull, temp, boring job. And Kevin has earned enough with his first sale of a book that they could buy a house. So they're just moving into their house when Dana all of a sudden disappears and finds herself saving a young boy's life who is drowning. His name is Rufus. His mother sees her and she's Black, so the mother's like terrified of her and starts to be verbally abusive, but then Rufus says that she saved his life. Dana will end up sort of being pulled back in time to this plantation in Maryland. It turns out that Rufus raped a woman named Alice, who was her great-great-grandmother. And Dana keeps getting pulled back in time to this plantation in Maryland, where you see the life of the slaves, the awful life. And Rufus is white, and he's in the plantation, and some of his behavior. And even Dana's husband, Kevin, gets pulled back in time at one point and ends up getting separated from her for 5 years. And neither Dana nor Kevin will ever be the same from this experience. And this book is exploring the ties that bind, so to speak, and you can see this binded hand right here on the cover. And the bind, the interrelationship and interdependency of, you know, slaves and their masters, and the horror of what went on. And it's beautifully written. It's very poignant. I highly recommend it. The illustrations are very well done. Now, I want to switch to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Knowledgeable people tell me that the film Blade Runner, which I have never seen, to be honest, is loosely based on this. What a hoot this book is. I love this book. We have a bounty hunter named Rick Deckard, who's married to a woman named Iran. Their marriage is kind of suffering. They have this machine, this Mercer machine, that can help change your mood. You can use it to make your mood happy. You can use it to make yourself depressed. You can change your mood. This is a kind of a dystopian Earth where, unfortunately, most of the animals have gone extinct. There's radioactive dust in the air. There's a character named John Isidore who has been affected by this radioactive dust. They actually call him a chicken head in the book. We have humans in the book on Earth, but there are other humans who have settled on Mars who are using androids as servants and abusing them. And some of the androids come back to Earth after killing some of these humans. And the androids are quite smart. It is very difficult to tell them apart from people. And the bounty hunter, Rick, has a particular test that he uses called the Voight-Kampff test to determine if someone is an android or a human. An interesting kind of, I found it a sad but funny note, is some people have pets that are not real because it's very hard to get your hands on animals in the Earth. So like our main character, Rick, has an electric sheep on his roof that looks just like a real sheep, but is not. Whereas he's jealous of his neighbor who has a real horse on the roof who is pregnant. And the book is I think it's fabulous. I think it's a little dystopian, but it's also a little bit funny. It's very creative. I love it. I can't recommend it enough. And lastly, this beautiful book called The Seep by Hannah Porter is, it's almost like a novella, really. I feel that it reads more like a novella. It's not very long. I think it's beautifully written. I love the concept. These aliens have changed everything and sort of gotten rid of a lot of our problems, like mortality and disease and fighting and all the things, and global warming and things that we all, war, it's all gone. But there is still some angst, especially with our main character, whose name is Trina First Horse Goldberg Onega, and she is a transgender female who is married to Deepa, and loves Deepa, but Deepa, because of the seep and all its magical qualities, wants to be reborn as a baby, because you can do this through SEEP technology. And she wants her wife, Trina, to raise her as a baby. And Trina, kind of understandably, does not want to do this. So unfortunately, Deba goes ahead to this rebirth thing. And Trina is mourning her loss all through this book in this sort of utopian earth. But Trina is having a lot of existential angst and grief and has to work her way through it. And she is very angry at one of their friends who's a performance artist, because he originally was white, but he changed all of his features so that he looks like a black friend of his. And Trina is furious about this because of all that she went to become who she feels she really is. She had to change her sex to feel like she's aligned with who she really is. So I think this book is talking about identity and loss and grief, and just creating this kind of utopian world in which, it's gone, but in fact, our main character is suffering quite a bit. And I think it raises questions about what is utopia. A lot of the people aren't reading books anymore, which of course, as a librarian, I do not like. They're very happy, and they can do things like have unicorn heads or, all kinds of things. But it's a good book. I really, really recommend it. And with that, I would like to turn my presentation over and pass to my esteemed colleague, Liz. So with no further ado, just give me 1 second while I try to escape from where I am. Sorry about that. Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk about 3 books, and let's get it started. Okay. So my first book today is Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. This book was okay. It didn't quite go where I wanted it to. This horror novel follows the same person at 2 different times in his life. In 1983, he is innocent 5-year-old Sean Crenshaw, who is caught up in the satanic panic of the 1980s. Led by the adults in his life to accuse his teacher as a satanic cultist, he unsuspectingly leaves a wake of destruction in his sleepy childhood town. In 2013, he is 35-year-old Richard Bellamy. He has a new name, a new life, and a new family. He's left Sean behind, doesn't want to think about it. It was a very traumatic experience. But as history starts to sort of repeat itself, he begins to think that maybe there actually was something to the satanic accusations of his past. This book actually made me very, very anxious because there's a lot of sort of interview sections of it where Sean, a 5-year-old, is sort of being coached and led by these adults who are supposed to be protecting him into making these horrible accusations that are completely false. And as a child, Sean knows that what he's saying isn't true, but he wants to be good and make these adults in positions of power happy. So he's saying like, oh yes, our teacher had us eat the flesh of a dead person, and we all had to sing this song and made up words, and nobody wore their pants. And just it was a little upsetting to just see. I'm like super not okay with child abuse in any way, shape, or form, and there's a lot of that in this book. So fair warning, you might not enjoy this book if that is an uncomfortable subject for you. But I am really interested in the satanic panic of the 1980s, so I did enjoy sort of reading a fictionalized account of that. My next book is called The Madman's Library by Edward Brooke Hitching. The Strangest Books, Manuscripts, and Other Literary Curiosities from History. This book is so fun. It has lots of fantastic pictures of just unusual forms of written communication. from, hundreds to thousands of years ago. So it has books that are written on clothing, books that are bound in human skin, great illustrations from, scientific expeditions where someone was given a description of an animal and then had to draw it even though they had never seen it. So it just does not look anything like the actual animal. There's just all sorts of fun, quirky little historical facts in here. There's a picture of the smallest book in the world, which is 70 by 90 millimeters. It's great. I love the pictures. I love the little itty bitty bits of text. It's super fun, especially if you're a fan of books or art. It's a great sort of pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. My last book that I'll be talking about is fittingly called Last Days by Adam Neville. I love this book so much. I'm a fan of Adam Neville. He has another book called The Ritual that was made into a film that's available on Netflix that I highly recommend. But this book, when documentary filmmaker Kyle Freeman is paid an exorbitant sum to make a last-minute documentary about a 1970s cult known as the Temple of the Last Days, he thinks his money problems are over. As he and his film partner, Dan, start interviewing survivors of the cult's infamously cruel and violent leader, Sister Catherine, strange and terrifying occurrences begin piling up. This is a truly scary read that anyone who is a fan of true crime, cults, or the supernatural will enjoy. There are some generally scary moments. There's some just like disgusting body horror, which I know is off-putting to a lot of people, but for me, I'm like, yes, more. So it just really, it's great. And also, if you like, I feel like it's really great for people who like podcasts and mockumentaries. Also would really enjoy this book. It has that kind of feel. Just 10 out of 10. Read it, not to your children because it will traumatize them, but maybe it's to yourself at night in the dark. It's just a very creepy, spoopy cult, and I really enjoyed it. So on that note, speaking of creepy and spoopy, I'm going to pass it over to Greg, who is actually wonderful, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Okay, bye.
Nice transition. This just that book actually might be what I'm presenting next time. That sounds really awesome. All right, we are going to get my thing set up. Oh, share screen. That would be important. All right, let's get this show on the road. All right, so for my books, I'm kind of cheating because one of the first book I'm presenting is the book we did for the Science Fiction Fantasy Book Club. But you know what? It counts because I read it. So there you go. Also, I really liked it. The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. This is, it's when I think of the term bittersweet, this book definitely comes to mind. It is kind of an interesting take on when Ray Bradbury wrote this book, like space travel was just beginning to become like entertained as a possibility. It was in the 1940s to 1950s when he did it. It's kind of it's a collection of short stories that eventually got merged together about the Chronicles of Exploring Mars. There is it kind of starts in the beginning about focusing on the Martians who already inhabit Mars, and the human encounters that occur with it, and eventually gravitates towards human colonization of Mars and what happens and what occurs, and the hilarity that ensues. And I'm being both like sarcastic and serious at the same time, because this book is, since it's a book of short stories, it really is kind of a mixture of tones and feels. Like there are some stories in this which are, I find hilarious. There's others that are horrifying, others that are sad, and then others that just kind of leave you with a sense of uncertainty. Because while all these stories are happening and humanity is colonizing Mars, there is the imminent threat of nuclear war that's going on Earth. So there's the question of, is this like the beginning of space exploration for humanity, or is this kind of the I guess last safe house, so to speak? Because if things go wrong on Earth, then Mars is probably going to be where the last chance that we get to actually exist and function as humanity. It's one of the stories, and one of the stories that I like the most, though, has to do with a called the House of Usher Part 2, in which case Earth has kind of gotten overrun by a bunch of book burners who just don't like any fictional story whatsoever and decide that, you know, short of the holy scriptures of the Bible, they're just going to pretty much burn everything that they don't really care or find inappropriate. So to celebrate, they go to this gentleman's house to have some glasses of wine, not realizing that their host is a disgruntled librarian who has a few plans of his own for them. And when a gentleman dressed in red starts walking around the house, these folks who've never read a book in their life don't really seem to realize the imminent danger that they're in. Nor do they understand what a pendulum's doing in the house either. So good times on that. I think one of the stories that hit me the hardest is There Will Come Soft Rains. It is pretty much a story that is based around a functioning house that is, I don't want to give too much away, but essentially it's a robotic house that is doing its everyday functions to help the inhabitants within. Think the Jetsons, essentially, not realizing that a nuclear bomb has gone off and everybody that it's serving is dead, and it's just going on its merry way doing it. It might be Ray Bradbury's best short story. I can't give this any, like, it's beautiful. Read it if you can. So following that, Piranesi. So we are going into some fantasy now, and this one, well, the last book that I was talking about is pretty old, 1950. This just came out last year. I don't want to give too much away because it's both short, and the less you know going into this, the more fun you're going to have with it. But I have to give you something because, you know, I'm telling you what I'm reading, and if I just say read it, you're going to be like, no. So what the story basically revolves around is there's this gentleman by the name of Piranesi, or at least that's what he's called. He lives in essentially what is a house that is, for lack of better terms, magical. It's a labyrinth that is filled with all sorts of wonders and beautiful statues. He's quite happy there. And he just writes a journal detailing all of his experiences, and you get to know, and that's how you discover the story. You're reading it through his eyes and his journal. And it's just him and one other gentleman who is doing scientific experiments, and he's trying to help him out. And as the story expands, you begin to pick up things that hints and clues as to what's going on, maybe before Piranesi does, which is one of these, it's one of those interesting things where you're like, oh, that's cool. And then there's other times like, oh God, get out. But it's, if you've read The Magician's Nephew, you might see where this is going, by C.S. Lewis. And that's really all I can say about it. But it's lovely, it's magical, it's whimsical, and it's very short. I give it, again, 5 out of 5 stars. Really, really enjoyed it. And then finally, last but definitely not least, an oldie but a goodie, and everybody's going to roll their eyes because they know that it's one of my personal favorites. Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. So I have some thoughts about this book because it'd been a while since I read it. But it's nice. I like it. It's for those of you who don't know, the story of Jurassic Park is that there is a gentleman by the name of John Hammond, and he is designing a new theme park. And he has gotten these two paleontologists, well, one's a paleontologist, one's a botanist, to go discover and see what this park is just before opening, just so some lawyers can get off of his back. Turns out this park is a park with dinosaurs in it, actual dinosaurs. He has managed to clone dinosaurs through mosquitoes trapped in fossilized amber, and created like a whole ecosystem for them. And it is it's very fascinating and exciting until somebody decides that they want some of the dinosaur embryos for themselves so they can sell it on the black market. And by doing this, electric fences get shut down and nature runs amok. And some terrifying things happen. So this book, it's very similar. So if you've watched the movie and if you watch the movie, in that sense, it's very similar to the book. Like the themes are very similar. Like the story, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the plot are very similar to Jurassic Park. However, the characters that are in here are incredibly different. And that's what kind of surprised me, actually, because again, I was 8 years old when I watched this film. It's probably one of the reasons I'm such a sci-fi junkie. And John Hammond, the creator of the park, in the movie, is almost he's a nice guy. He's a nice human being who ultimately did not realize what he was doing, and everything got loose, and he's really devastated by it, and he really wishes he could fix the mistakes of the past. In this one, when somebody gets eaten by a dinosaur, the guy is just eating some ice cream and going, sometimes there's casualties in the way of greatness. Have some ice cream. We'll figure this out. We'll pay the right people. It's gonna be fine. Don't you worry. And I'm just like, capitalism, just doing it again. But but in any case, I guess this was done deliberately by like Steven Spielberg, because he admitted he kind of like emphasized with Hammond's dream of creating like wonder and stuff. And I got to admit, this might be nostalgia talking. I think I liked the movie better, which I know is like slanderous for a librarian to say. Like Kelly's going to probably ask for my library badge or something tomorrow. But it's definitely a lot different. It's a different tone. If you're looking for a horror story, this is probably more. That's what this is going to be more like. There are some scenes in here that are downright frightening. The dinosaurs are really, really creepy in some points. Ian Malcolm is not as good as he was in the movie, but that might just be because, he's not played by Jeff Goldblum. So, there you go. But I would say give it a read. It's entertaining, and it's got dinosaurs. So what more could you ask? And with that, I am going to turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Laura.
Thank you, Greg. Just to make you feel better regarding Kelly asking for your librarian card back, this is actually a quote from her on our latest staff reads. For those who don't know, staff reads is a monthly blog post that we do similar to this, but where all the a lot of the staff will share books that they have been reading and enjoying or not so much. And this quote, where is it? The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. This has rarely happened, and I hate that I'm saying this, but I thought the show was better than the book. And that is from our director, Kelly. So if she cannot ask for your library card back, if you're worried at all about that, she just very recently had a similar experience.
Great.
And by the way, speaking of Jurassic Park, I am very glad I had the luxury of being on mute, so I was able to hum the theme music from the movie and not have to worry about us getting a copyright violation, because we cannot actually share copyright music on this video, but it is so hard not to have that going through your head when anyone ever mentions Jurassic Park. And one more thing about that book, if you ever meet my father in person, a biologist, do not talk about the biology in either the book or the movie, because he will, don't get him started. Hi, Dad, how are you?
I imagine it's a bit outdated.
Even in 93, he was extremely bothered by it. So I think it's
I
both
see.
outdated and not
right
terribly
at all.
accurate. I guess I was an English major, so what do I know? Mosquitoes
Science.
and amber seemed realistic to me. Sorry, Greg.
No, nope. Science, science fiction. That's why.
Exactly. All right, moving on. Let me share my screen. Oh, spoiler alert for my last book. All right. So my first book is Whereabouts by Jupa Lahiri. Many of you may be familiar with this author. She is one of my favorites. An unnamed narrator in an unspecified location takes readers through a series of vignettes through her life in this collection, which is not quite a short story collection, not quite a novel, something I would call it a bit of a hybrid. And I know that word has been used a lot the last year with hybrid for a lot of work situations, but in this case, different meaning. Book is a bit melancholy, but I wouldn't call it sad. It's very lyrical, again, like so much of her other writing. This is her first book of fiction that Lahiri wrote originally in Italian as opposed to English, and then she herself translates it into English. I'd love to say I read the Italian version. I did not. I read the English version. I did take Italian for one semester, not enough that I would have been able to read this book in its original language. You can actually read about Lahiri's sort of ventures, if you will, learning Italian in her other book, the nonfiction book, In Other Words. I always wonder when I do read a book that's been translated, so that was originally in a language other than English, I always worry what has been lost in translation. It is, because things are always lost in translation, but seldom do we have the luxury of reading a book in which the translator and author are the same person. So I feel like maybe less was lost in translation. And while the book is leisurely, it's not very long. It's also very hard to put down. I actually read it almost in one sitting, sitting outside in really cold weather. I had gloves and a jacket on. I had Confession. I actually got it at a bookstore, an independent bookstore. And I read it right outside that bookstore because you couldn't go anywhere to sit and read it. So I just sat outside on a bench and reading it. And it was that good. I also had the pleasure of watching a live webinar with Jim Lahiri talking about writing prose in Italian, and also about translating her own work, what that was like. And it's very fascinating. If you can, she's done several interviews about this book and she does talk about that process. I definitely recommend watching those. And I also recommend reading the book. Okay, so next, Things We Lost to the Water by Eric Nguyen. In 1978, Huang moves to New Orleans from Vietnam with her two sons, Bin, who later changes his name to Ben, and Tuan. To the course of nearly 30 years, Huang and her sons navigate life in the bayou. Huang sort of adapting to her surroundings, as well as sort of life, living life in the US, what that means, as well as accepting what has really happened with her husband in Vietnam. I'm not going to get into that because it's not a huge spoiler, but it is a small spoiler. Ben and Tuan, meanwhile, they come of age. Ben is accepting his sexual identity. Tuan has a rebellious phase, for lack of a better word. Like he goes through, he has a bit of a teen life of crime before getting out of that phase. Several years go by and the bonds between the three strengthen and weaken. I'm not going to spoil anything at the about the ending, and there's not a whole lot to spoil, but notice that I said this takes place over the course of nearly 30 years, so not quite 30 years, and starts in 1978, and it takes place in New Orleans. So if you do the math and know about somewhat recent events in New Orleans, you can kind of figure out what becomes a central climax of this book without getting too much into that. This book is both sad and uplifting. It does, it's very character driven, again, because it does take place over several years. And I really enjoyed it. I very much recommend it. If you don't like books that sort of jump forward in time, this may not be the book for you, but I just really loved it. And again, I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. I say this all the time, but this cover is gorgeous. I was very affected by it. All right, my third book is Why We Cook, Women on Food, Identity, and Connection by Lindsay Gardner, or rather really more edited by Lindsay Gardner. Gardner has gathered women from all parts of the food industry, including chefs, food bloggers, food scientists, food activists, food bookstore owners. Yes, that's a thing. In the Bay Area, there is a food/cookbook bookstore. It is on my list, and that is also my new dream job. I'm opening up a food bookstore. You heard it here first. Names ranging from Anna Ross, Amanda Saab, Christina Martinez, Irene Lee, Priya Krishna, Dory Greenspan, Carla Hall, and so many others. There are 100 in total. Women contributed thoughts, recipes, essays, book recommendations, and advice. I have so many new recipes I want to try, so many restaurants I want to try all over the US once I start traveling again. The realities of being a woman in both the restaurant and food world is discussed honestly here. And I felt both hopeful and honestly a little frustrated at the continued struggles. One very, very serious warning: do not read this book when you're hungry under any circumstances. For that matter, be careful reading it when you're full. I honestly planned the reading of this book based on when I was eating because it was torture otherwise. And then I found I was still hungry again after eating a huge meal. And it's very hard. Food books in general, I think, are hard to read when you're hungry. It's like you shouldn't go to the grocery store when you're hungry, and you shouldn't read books like this. But it's a great book. I actually, I did get it from the libraries. I get most of my books, but I have a bit of a cookbook problem in that I buy a lot of cookbooks. If you ever been to my house, you'll see it's a lot of cookbooks. And this very well may end up joining that collection. So, do you hate blind dates? Is your favorite movie Weekend at Bernie's? Do you think lavish weddings are over the top and a little too expensive? Do your relatives meddle in every single part of your life? But in a mainly supportive and loving manner? Then I have the book for you. As anyone who regularly watches our little show here on YouTube knows, I'm a big fan of romance novels, especially contemporary ones. I admit that I was drawn to this book without reading a plot summary at all. And based on the fact it was classified as a romance and the cover, I figured it would be along the same lines of Jasmine Guillory, Emily Henry, or Helen Huang, three of my favorite contemporary romance authors. Well, I was happily listening to this audiobook because I was out on a nature walk without the headphones. I'm not just saying that. I really wasn't using the headphones, and no one was around me, so I wasn't disturbing them, but I also was being careful and aware of my surroundings. Public service announcement. This book took such a turn I was not expecting. Now, if I had read the plot summary or the book jacket, I would have known about this turn. However, and I promise I did read the reviews for work, but we read a lot of reviews and you forget them months later. I have to say, I loved the plot twist, mainly because I was so unexpected. I gotta be honest with you with this, the title, Dial A for Aunties, and I'm pronouncing it Aunties because that's how they pronounce it on the audiobook. I actually normally pronounce A-U-N-T as aunt, which I realize is not a Massachusetts thing. But I mean, obviously it's based on Dial M for Murder. Not sure why that went over my head, but it did. Anyway, Madeline, or Medi Chan, is part of a loving, but as I said, meddling family with her mother and her three aunts, big aunt, second aunt, and fourth aunt in California. There is a curse in which all the men in her family eventually disappear, that is, leave, although actually I wonder if they really leave after the plot of this novel. Despite the fact, though she did fall in love in college with Nathan, she decides, instead of joining him after college on the East Coast, she decides to stay with her family and join their wedding business as a wedding photographer. The motto for the company, again, their last name is Chan, is don't leave your big day to chance, leave it to Chans. I would totally hire anyone with a slogan like that for my wedding. That is incredibly awesome. I love a good pun. Anyway, something happens as a result of the worst blind date ever. Literally the worst blind date ever. If you think you have a worse one, I bet you don't. Right before a big wedding weekend, so very fancy clients for her and her family. And things just continue to get more and more absurd. If you have trouble suspending your disbelief, this book will not be at all in your wheelhouse. But if you enjoy a fun, dark comedy, family stories, learning more about traditions for the Chinese Indonesian culture, I highly recommend this fast-paced and fun yet ridiculous novel. There are also a lot of food references in this book. So again, just like Why We Cook, don't read this on an empty stomach. I was listening to this and reading the other one, and it was a bit torturous. So do be very careful. And those are my 4 books. Oh, and it was, I'm sorry, it was Dial A For Aunties by Jesse Q. Santanto. I realized I don't think I actually said the author's name. I had my whole cute intro lined up, and I just realized I didn't actually put the book title in there. So that is the book. One thing I just want to note before we continue on to our TV discussion is we are so sad to hear about the death of Eric Carle, very famed and noted children's author and illustrator. But we are very glad that we are actually able to offer you for a limited time on Overdrive and Libby. We can offer a good number of his titles without a wait. Right now, normally you have to wait a while for some Overdrive and Libby titles, but many of Eric Carle's titles we are able to make available to you without a wait right now, including probably his most famous book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. We also do own several copies of his print books, so you're also, we're happy to put those on hold. But if you want something right this second, please check out Overdrive and Libby. If you are a Waltham resident, I should add, and you can get several of his books without a wait. So I just want to throw that in there, and I'm gonna go to gallery view. And who wants to share a TV show? I know I've seen a little bit, but does anyone else wanna start with that? Liz looks like she's raising her hand, so go ahead.
Okay. Do you like Australia? Do you like frogs / toads eating everything? Do you like environmental disasters? Because I have the YouTube-based 1988 Australian documentary for you called Cane Toads, An Unnatural History. It's not really a TV show, but it is a 45-minute documentary on YouTube about the saga of the cane toad in Australia. And I know that sounds boring, but this documentary is like an internet meme before internet memes existed. It has some of the most bizarre shots I have ever seen. There's just a random scene of a man singing in a shower while toads are threateningly hopping towards him. It has senior citizens feeding toads cat food. A scientist just smacking 2 toads together. It's so weird and so good. The short story is the cane toad was introduced in Northern Australia to help take care of the cane grub, which was killing sugarcane plantation stuff. But the cane toad ate literally everything but the cane grub and actually became an even bigger nuisance than the cane grub. So I recently saw my aunt and uncle, and even though I was only with them for a day and a half, I made us watch this 45-minute documentary, and they were like, what did we watch and where do I learn more? So I'm evangelizing on the cane toads on unnatural history, free to stream on YouTube.
Thank you. That sounds very interesting. And that's awesome about your aunt and uncle as well. One thing I started watching is I don't know if anyone else here has been watching it, Star Wars The Bad Batch on Disney Plus. It's the latest Star Wars animated show. It's a sequel of sorts to the Clone Wars. I'm a Star Wars fan, but I do not like the prequels. I think because I'm a little bit of get off my lawn about them. Although I liked the three recent movies. Well, maybe not Rise of Skywalker, but I like the other movies. But the prequels, not a fan. And to my shock, I ended up loving the animated show, The Clone Wars. I think because it did end up expanding on a lot of characterization that I had issues with in the actual prequel movies, and as well as really get into the whole ethics of the clone program. And I realize if you've never seen the Star Wars prequels, I probably am making comments that don't mean anything, but The Bad Batch really just takes that one further. Picture the show The A-Team, if you all remember the show The A-Team. And again, if I wasn't worried about copyright violations, I would actually play you the intro to The A-Team to give you an idea of what that was about. Basically, if that took place in the Star Wars universe, that's kind of what The Bad Batch is. It's kind of these ragtag clones that were called, they're Clone Force 99. They're disparagingly called, I don't know if I just used that word right, but the Bad Batch because they were, quote, not my word, defective clones. But in fact, their chips don't go off during our Order 66, which is the order to kill all the Jedi for those who watched Revenge of the Sith or the end of the Clone Wars cartoon. And so they end up are on the run from the newly formed Galactic Empire, but they help people along the way. So the A-Team reference, former military people that are on the run from the government, help people along the way. That was the premise of the A-Team for those who forget that show. And it's, I really like it. The animation is not, I mean, it's better than what I can do, but it's not great on the Star Wars animation. I don't love the actual animation style, but I think the voice work is amazing. I really like, again, I think it really expands characterization in a way it didn't do with the movies from that era. And it really just asks a lot of questions about ethics and really gives you an idea of what it's like in the early days of the Galactic Empire in Star Wars, something we really haven't seen on screen. I know there's a lot of books and comics that take place during that era. I personally have not read a lot of them. I mostly am a screen Star Wars fan. So I'm really enjoying it. It's on every Friday on Disney Plus, and you can get Disney Plus, by the way, from if you're not a subscriber, because we have Roku's at the library that have Disney Plus on them. So you can actually watch it yourself. So I've been enjoying it. And then I always have one thing to confess with the show. I'm now doing my biannual, I guess you'd say, rewatch of Dallas, and it gets simultaneously worse and better every time I watch it. Like sometimes some episodes I watch, I was like, wow, this is really not aged well, which is something I always know going into it, but really truly. But sometimes I'm really amazed by some of the acting. Barbara Bel Geddes, who played Miss Ellie, is just like, she was a beautiful actress. I mean, she was just amazing with really a lot of absurd storylines. And she actually she does a really great, when she gets widowed, when the real life actor who plays her husband passed away, they obviously kill him off in the show. And she does really, I think, a wonderful job as someone who is losing a loved one. Her character has breast cancer, which, and that's done not for sensationalism. And I really think she elevates the show in a way. So if you are a fan of especially old movies, because Barbara Bel Geddes has a really great, varied movie career. She was in I Remember Mama. She was in an Alfred Hitchcock movie. I want to say it was Vertigo, but Bad Librarian. I should have double checked that. But she definitely wasn't in a Hitchcock movie. And but in a lot of ways the show hasn't aged well, but it's still good, mindless entertainment. Anyone else? Either I doubt anyone else here has seen Dallas, but Louise and then Greg.
Actually, Liz emboldened me to confess what I have been watching. So this is an oldie, but I think a greatie. I've been watching it on YouTube. The full series is available now. You guys will be so excited. Jonathan Katz. professional therapist, and it's hilarious and it's old, but John Benjamin is on it. And I just want to tell you one thing. One claim to fame I have is when I worked in the Cambridge Public Library, John Benjamin was a shelver there. So yes, I met John Benjamin. Okay, so very delightful young man. Anyway, but now he's middle-aged. And don't ask about me. So, it's hilarious, and various comedians come in. It's an animated series, and they come in and they're patients of Dr. Katz, played by the comedian Jonathan Katz, and John Benjamin plays his son, who kind of just sits around and eats and doesn't really have a job. And it's hilarious. It's really funny. And they have a receptionist who's always kind of cranky and very funny. I totally recommend that. And now I'm going to confess one more thing, and then we'll pass it off to Greg. But I often watch on YouTube also Key and Peele, who are like sketch comics, I guess, unless they're improvising their stuff. They're hilarious. I've always loved them. I can watch their skits over and over again. I was just watching them last night. I adore them. So there you go. Two confessions from Louise. Go ahead, Greg.
Thank you. So there's a reoccurring theme I'm noticing of animated shows, and I'm just going to add to that. I've been currently watching Invincible, actually, on Amazon Prime. Usually don't care for Amazon, but I had to go check this one out. But yeah, so what's going on is that if you've Invincible pretty much is a superhero story that's kind of focuses around this kid by the name of Mark Grayson. He's a 17-year-old who's essentially this world's his dad's essentially this world's version of Superman, Omni-Man, and he's just discovered that he's had superpowers. And his dad's like, very Clark Kent and being like, oh, great, son, we're gonna teach you how to be a superhero, and you're going to help save the world, and going to show you into the basics. And the first episode kind of feels like if you're a comic book fan, it's almost every like coming of age Superman story where it's like superhero story, like say for example Spider-Man, like I want to save the world, but also I want to have a girlfriend, and she's always getting ticked at me whenever I'm like going to save the world and trying to juggle school and keeping like the super identity thing. So it doesn't seem like anything that we haven't seen before. And this is the first episode, after all of this stuff of like, trying to be like we've seen a dozen times, his dad, Omni-Man, leads the rest of what is essentially the Justice League into a secret meeting and brutally murders them horrifically. Just, it shows you exactly what would happen if Superman punched you in the face and wasn't holding back. So after that happens, since this is done in a secret meeting, when people find out that the rest of this, they're called the Guardians of the Globe, are dead, it means that all these teenage superheroes who are having to who were just kind of like playing like backup or sidekicks have to step up and try to be like helping Omni-Man, who they don't know has done all these things, try to like save the world and stop it from like alien invasions, evil scientists, demons from like the underworld, all of that stuff, and do what they can. However, it's also kind of like a miss, because you're seeing like Invincible's journey through all of this and trying to be a superhero, but it's also beginning to it also is showing it's also a little bit of a mystery, kind of in the same ways that like Knives Out is a mystery, as in you know who did it supposedly, but you don't know why, and people start to put the piece, and it's through 8 episodes people try to put the pieces together as to what this is occurring, why this happened, and if they do find out, how the heck do you confront Superman about murdering a bunch of people? So it's an interesting take on a show. I feel like people want to would compare this to the other Amazon show, The Boys, but while I feel like The Boys is more of a social commentary, this is more about like personal interactions and character development. It doesn't really have too much to say about like a particular society or anything like that, but more of like these archetypes that we view as people or heroes and things like that. Also got to say, it's got a fantastic star-studded cast. Omni-Man is played by J.K. Simmons. Invincible is played by Stephen Young, who does an awesome performance. The superhero Taylor is voiced by Mark Hamill. Sandra Oh is Invincible's mom. You've got Seth Rogen's in it, for God's sakes. Zachary Quinto. I mean, really, like Amazon just pretty much just got everybody out. So I got to give them credit for that. It's really story driven, and I'm really curious to see where it goes. But I cannot stress enough, even though it looks like that 2000s Justice League cartoon from like and the Batman like cartoon from the beginning, do not show this to kids, because this is like, in some ways, because it's a cartoon, they're able to show so much horrific just death and destruction. It's kind of nuts. But yeah, I like it. I'm curious to see what they do for the second season.
I've heard really good things about that show, and it's definitely on my list. I know, I mean, I feel like it, with the cast, it seems to combine a lot of franchises like that into one. You know, you got the Star Wars and Mark Hamill, you know, the Star Trek with Zachary Quinto, you had the Walking Dead, right, with Stephen Yeun. He was in that, right? I actually never watched The Walking Dead, but I feel like that's what he's known for. And then and J.K. Simmons from the Sony, or the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, and it's so I love that they put. And then Sandra Oh is just awesome as Sandra Oh. I guess you could throw Grey's Anatomy in there, kind of a different genre, but yeah, that's definitely been on my list for a while. It sounds very intriguing, and I would say people. You remind me a little bit. I've been watching, also slightly embarrassing, Superman and Lois on the CW. I love the show Supergirl, or I loved the show Supergirl. I feel like it's puttering to the end a little bit, but I had really liked the Clark, the Superman in that universe, and he's sort of now been given a spinoff with his family, and I love the relationship between him and Lois Lane. Like, they seem like just a normal couple who, by the way, like, his day job happens to be Superman, and they have twin teenage sons, one of whom has powers, one of whom may or may not so far. And that kind of the premise sort of reminds a little bit about that, minus murdering a bunch of people. But they are showing like Superman's getting angry in this show, and sometimes it manifests itself in a way. And like, yeah, what would happen if that happens? So yeah, I definitely want to watch that. And I remember Dr. Katz, by the way. I absolutely remember that show. So you're not that old, Louise, because that means I have to say I am. So before we sign off, anything else? Nope. All right. Well, again, most of what we talked about today is available at the library. We are happy if we don't own it in print, we can always put it on hold for you. A lot of our titles are also available as an ebook or digital audiobook through Overdrive or Hoopla. Hoopla, you never have to wait. Overdrive, we do have some titles that we are able to make wait proof, if you will, but those occasionally you do still have to wait for some titles on that platform, but we always do get more licenses in that case. And with using any of those platforms or putting a hold on anything, always call the library. We're always happy to help you. Just a reminder, next week, our new hours will start. We will be opening evenings on Tuesdays and Thursdays until 7, but we will be opening at 11 a.m. So Tuesday, June 1st, we will be opening, we'll be open from 11 to 7, and then open Wednesday and Friday from 8:30 to 4:30, and Thursday from 11 to 7. And we are now opening Saturdays for a few hours in the morning from 9 to 12. And that will be starting not this Saturday, but a week from Saturday. So June 5th. Thank you, Liz. I was like, I think that's the 5th. And we are closed Monday for Memorial Day. So, but we are very excited that we have been able to expand our services more. And It's been great seeing all of you in the building. And thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your day and your week. We will be back on this channel on June 30th, streaming live at 2:30, but as always, you can watch it anytime after. So do the Zoom wave. I feel like there was some show in the 60s where they used to do this too as well. And yeah, have a great, enjoy your day, everyone. Let me end.